I can't believe we've done 20 of these things. It definitely feels a lot longer. I'm also kind of disappointed that it's only 20 because I feel like we were like at episode 52. I feel like the era of before October 7th was just like a year ago. And the last like 4 episodes have just been like a steady like I've aged 10 years. I don't know about you guys.
Decades have happened in the last few weeks. And
didn't Lennon say something kind of quirky?
Something like that.
No, I think it was Obama.
There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a pretty sick quote from Obama, I have to say.
Way to go, Obama.
Do you think he was saying that when he was pillaging Libya?
I hope so.
Yes. Socialism with Obama characteristics is what we have.
Please stop talking, and I will kick you off the stage. Early. I can't. So, real quick, twins, before we talk about our lovely guest here, let me copy this link real quick. I've been getting like an influx in troll comments, and it's not that particularly bothers me. I just thought the timing was kind of weird because like I had just been thinking about how I don't have like many troll comments, and then all of a sudden it just kind of came out of nowhere, and it's all like the same kind of like nonsense where it's like people being like nerd or like bro keeps yapping. I've been getting that a lot, which is funny because Cutie Pie, who's not here, says that a lot, and I'm kind of like, is that like low key, high key? Is that you? But anyway, let me share my screen.
It's just Cutie messing with you.
Right?
It's evil Cutie.
Evil Cutie. So it's just regular Cutie? Yeah. So real quick, so this is a TikTok. I can you guys see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So this is a TikTok that I stitched a couple months ago. POV: Chinese and Russian forces pull up to the wrong neighborhood in Compton after dropping 2 old heads. A loud tire screech can be heard. The Russians already know what's going on and have lost how the Chinese are confused at the loud bass in the air. I don't think the sound will play, but try. Any sound?
Mine's me making this.
Oh, I heard it.
Only because I'm going back to bed. But I understand these are probably being made by 14-year-olds, or maybe it's a psyop. I don't know. Besides the scenario of the continental United States being invaded, and I don't care what MSNBC or Fox News say, just geographically speaking, it doesn't make any sense. Why would oppressed nationals in this country be willing to fight on behalf of this government? I mean, just look how the government treats its people. Look how capitalism in this government, how it puts people in positions of poverty, only to be exploited day in and day out. And I'm sure some people would feel, the Call of Duty or whatever if the country was being invaded, but I just don't understand these memes.
Yeah, so I posted that.
I remember I saw one that was it's so dumb, but like it was so like, and it was like that guy. I remember this conversation had begun with like people talking about how geographically like the United States would be really hard to invade, and then I saw someone who really made a TikTok who was like Russians wouldn't invade because the people in Appalachia would fuck them up and cryptids would get them, and I was like, you can't be like Bigfoot's out for them, like that's not.
Yeah.
I'm just picturing Bigfoot just like grabbing Russians and just like whipping them around.
That propaganda will go hard. I think more of like Mothman though, like getting people. I met Mothman once, but that's a whole other story. We'll get into that another day. Anyway, so my point is, I've been getting a lot of comments on that particular video. It must have hit the algorithm again, and I have one, and I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but I have it here on my phone, where this person was basically telling me how he's like, capitalism is not the worst system in the world. You definitely, no, you know what? I'm going to actually read you exactly what he said because I'm not going to do it justice. 2 seconds. The system is better than the majority of systems. Could it improve? Absolutely. Grow up, dude. Get some drive and you'll grow out of this nonsense. And I mean, you guys know me. I'm a very driven person. I'm all over the place in terms of the shit that I'm up to. So, I just told him very bluntly, I'm more driven than you. He comments. he comments.
Legit, yeah.
Yeah, he comments. LMFAO, if you had any drive, you wouldn't make these dog shit takes. Capitalism took me from the streets to 100K a year minimum. Get your money up, kid. All right, so a few things of that. Why were you on the street in the first place? You should have never been put in that situation. Sorry. And 100K is not a lot of money. And I only know that because I make more than that, and I'm broke as shit. And like that's it. But no, like I have a teeny tiny amount of money in the bank. If I fall down the stairs after this podcast and break my legs, I'm fucked. I can't live off workers' comp. I don't have that much in the savings. I may able to pay rent for maybe a month and a half. But if I need surgery, like I'm done. That's it. I don't know what I'm going to do. So, it's just, it's not a lot of money. And that's how I know it's probably a child, because it's not a lot of money. That's just at the end of the day.
They just don't have that framework. They don't have the reference for how much things actually cost.
Yeah.
Also,
clearly, if they were flexing on 100K, they don't actually know. Sorry.
I mean, to be fair, I think it is also like regional, right? Like it depends on where you live for sure. But also like people need to understand what survivorship bias is. Just because you were able to do something doesn't mean that it's like a thing for people to be able to do. Yeah, and also like generally poor and low income people are the hardest working people I've ever met. Like I work in an office now and I'm from like a very low income background, and like they're all very lovely, nice people. Y'all don't work hard. Y'all don't.
No. And right now, like I'm changing jobs, but right now I work in nursing administration, and like, bruh, exactly. It's just like these people who. What's up?
I was gonna. It just popped in my head. I remember months ago seeing this TikTok of this woman. She's not like she's not a political person or anything like that. She's just a worker. And she had gotten a promotion at her job and got to move to like a corporate office. And she was like, she was all excited because she's like, now I can actually do some stuff. I can do some more work because the money that she was getting a significant pay boost. So she's like, I'm going to be doing more work, and I'm going to be making I can make real change within the company type thing. And then like a few weeks later, she was like, she had posted how almost everything she was doing was meetings and emails, and she was like, when do I actually work? She was like, I don't understand how I'm making money.
That's what I'm saying, bro. And like,
it was wild that she came to that realization. She was like, oh, I'm not doing anything.
But that's the thing. And like Beba just said that, like, poor people are the hardest working people. Like I'm so fucking bored at that job, and like it doesn't pay well, so I can't even justify like, oh, I'm just gonna fuck around on the computer all day. Like I'm losing my mind. Like I want to with the patients and whatever, and I work with these people who, for the most part, are decent and nice, but a lot of them, they just can't. They don't have any skills outside of like being a boomer in an office. So like if that job were to go under, they're fucked. They have no survivability at all. And the whole culture of the office is held up by the fact that nobody's doing any work, but everyone's pretending to do work. It's disgusting. It really is just capitalism in a nutshell.
For me, as a increasingly older worker, every time these market shifts happen and I get booted because the financial industry no longer needs me at that particular position, I'm just staring down the reality that probably in 5 to 6 years, 7 years, it's going to be increasingly hard for me to actually find work. And with 2 herniated discs in my back, I'm limited in the kind of physical work that I used to be able to do that I no longer do. I can do it, but I would be a liability to myself and others. So it's just a grim reality that you start to face when you actually live in the world, rather this online game of, bro, I made it so far. I've got 100K. You've got nothing. You've got nothing. You have no security. You have. I don't care if you're making 200K a year.
No.
Well, maybe it's this system is vicious and it will spit all of us out before we're through with it.
For sure. So you're really banking on the revolution starting in like a couple of years, huh?
I literally have to. It's my retirement plan.
Yeah. So we have to get the rev up.
Yeah,
Bebe,
sorry to build off of that, like I'm not on the end of being like an older worker, but like one of the things I think that is like very depressing is like my mom passed away when I was a little bit younger, but she like worked at a grocery store. She was like a union member, and
Been there.
she had 4 daughters, and so she raised all 4 of us. And I can think of like all these lists of things that like she wanted to do that were very normal. It was just stuff like travel and like go on vacations and whatever. It was like never achieved because she worked up until like a month before she died. Because she had to, because there was no other options, because she couldn't afford anything else. And like that's the reality for millions of people.
Exactly.
Like not only is it terrible to die after you work today, but like to die like weeks before, like because you have a terminal illness like that or whatever, even an accident. You know, it's just not. I hate it here.
One thing, so my wife's father just retired, and he had been working since he was 14. He is now 70. He worked. He did a little extra because they were like, "Oh, we'll give you an extra $500 a month or something on your retirement or Social Security or whatever." And last time I saw him, I was chatting with him, and he was like, "I don't know what to do." Because he's like, since he was 14, he's only known work. And for like 30 years, he only knew that job. So he's like, he goes out back and chops wood and like just tinkers around the house because he's like, I don't know what to do. Like he never really developed outside of that.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you know,
Hi, buddy.
humans naturally want to work, you know.
Mm-hmm.
People are driven to do labor in one form or another, but when we labor for people who don't care for us, if we might as well die on shift, then it really doesn't, you know, it's I mean, Marx has written about this, all the homies written about it, you know,
He's got a whole book
alienated,
you know?
For our labor. Yeah, well, I like the one Obama wrote.
But also, we work way too, like, we all work way too fucking much.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
Even like hunter-gatherer, like primitive societies, it like are not like primitive. I don't. That's a bad term to use, but like earlier.
I don't know what you mean.
We know what you mean.
Yeah.
Like they only work like 20 hours a week. Like, there was like a 40-hour work week is not natural by any like capacity.
No, it's not.
Yeah, and that depended on region to region because I have a pretty good basis in education on anthropology. Like in the heavily forested areas, we're talking like rainforest areas. We're talking more like 8 hours a week for people to work all to get everything they need. It's insane, like how we work. It's insane.
And we very naturally take breaks. We had a lot of rest. We would break things up into like 30-minute chunks half the time, and it's just like now you're sitting at a chair staring at a screen for up to 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
Getting resources that all the resources are already gathered.
Speaking of staring at, hold on a minute. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No, go
we
ahead.
have to introduce you at 15 minutes into the into
Right.
the show.
We're
Who are you?
Terrible with intros. Sorry.
How did you get in here?
Yeah, right. I think it was mostly. I think she just shot their shot, and was just like, "Hey, I want to come on the thing," and we made them wait months and months. So this is Bebe, a student of linguists specializing in East Slavic languages and cultures, and they've come here to talk to us about what do you want to talk about?
One is Beba.
Beba.
Way to go, Ivan.
None of you motherfuckers even tried, so don't even. The language expert's gonna talk to me. All right.
And I want to talk a little bit about just like how NATO's proxy war in Russia and Ukraine and the ways like the media has constructed narratives about that mirror the narratives that we're seeing come out about what's going on in Israel and Palestine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. Go for it. I mean, I think we're all virtually the same here. So then, actually, let me ask you before you go for it. So the war in between NATO and Russia started because Putin is trying to restore the Soviet Union, correct?
Obviously.
Finally, thank God.
I think that it, like Putin's government is still like a capitalistic government and still has, like imperialist goals and tendencies in mind. And so like but with that being said, like American intervention in the region, and that intervention ultimately beginning with like the dissolution of the USSR, has like led to these border conflicts, not just in Ukraine and Russia, but also between like Azerbaijan and Armenia. And the United States' role in this conflict is really, really important, and this conflict wouldn't exist without that role. So, yeah, I guess my perspective is that I'm not necessarily like I just like I think the United States' like only goal in this should be to promote peace, should be to promote like trying to get some kind of an agreement or peace negotiation. And generally, I believe in the self-determination of peoples, including Eastern Ukrainians. And while they do want to leave Ukraine, from the things that I've seen, at least, it shows that like they'd like to be kind of an independent state or some kind of like intermediary state between these two, and not necessarily a part of either one. And I think that should be, that would be the ultimate solution, I guess. But I think that that's very unlikely.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Agreed.
I think at this stage in the global conflict, the Donbass, Luhansk, and Donetsk are not going to. They're going to be part of the Russian Federation at this point, which is unfortunate because all of us on the podcast support self-determination for all peoples. I do believe their fight has been just. It's just pretty crazy the extent of the American propaganda machine that has exploited this region. I do agree with you. Much like with the genocide against Palestinians today, that in a perfect world, if the United States was a beacon of hope and peace and freedom, then it could step in and say, no, we're going to do it, this way. But that's not the case. The United States has never been that. It's never going to be that. I remember when the Ukraine crisis, escalated the first time. I was in high school when Crimea was invaded, so to say. And it's just wild that, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, the situation escalated even farther. And the very fact that it's been 2 years and it's still going, it's just, it's bizarre. It's sad. In my analysis, it seems like the conflict has pretty much come to virtually a stalemate. But with what is occurring now with the American money and guns going to Israel, that it seems like that might flip. But what do you think?
I mean, I think that we were like, my perspective, at least when this first happened, was that like the United States needed to negotiate peace immediately, because the longer this went on, the worse it was going to be for Ukraine. And from like reports that I've been reading from both like American, Russian, and Ukrainian sources, like what it seems like is that while even like I think there was like a quote from a general of his that was like, even if all of the guns were delivered tomorrow, we don't have the people to fire them off. And so like while it looks and appears like a stalemate, because like they're just doing like World War I trench warfare basically.
Yeah.
The reality is that like Russia has the population and also the like means to sustain this for much longer. So it's sort of an endurance match, but like especially considering how much of Ukrainians' population has fled, and also the fact that like there is extensive things like where men are like trying to pay and like sneak out of the country to not be, brought to the front lines. It doesn't look good. I think the conflict won't. I don't know if it'll go on for much longer. I can't say for certain, right? But like, the longer it goes on, the worse that this will be for Ukraine, and the worse they'll have at time in negotiations, because it just strengthens Russia by having them like be able to maintain stability, which the goal of this was to destabilize them.
Right. No,
And
for sure.
Can I ask? I'm sorry if I interrupted.
you're good.
Can I ask what you make of Zelensky's statement well over a year ago now, where he said the goal of his vision of Ukraine is a big Israel?
what that says to me is that the ethnically Russian population of Ukraine would be treated in a way that is similar to Palestinians.
Yeah. For sure.
Agreed.
Given not only the dark history of white supremacy and Nazism in Ukraine that had been exacerbated by the OSS during and after World War II, and then the CIA, and then NATO now. I mean, that really is the only direction that it's gone. I mean, for the last 2 years on Telegram, I mean, it's mind-blowing the evidence of how pervasive Nazis are fighting on the front line in Ukraine.
And not to mention also that the creation of a big Israel means big money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Big money for the military-industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like they've also implemented a wide variety of laws that have already started the process of like degrading ethnic Russians to second class citizens within the country. One of the biggest ones being like any official paperwork done for either private or like government interaction can't be done in Russian anymore. I think it's really important when I say things like that to remind like people that like a third of their population, that is the native language. So it'd be like, you know, like in America, like obviously language laws are garbo here, but you know, we have a huge portion of population who natively speak Spanish, and at least they can fill out paperwork in a language they are familiar with. They can interact with their government in a language they are familiar with. And so to take that right away from a third of your citizens already shows the process in which like they will continue to like have their rights and their ability to interact with their government taken away from them. I think it's like
sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think like one of the most recent ones was like you can't even play Russian music in Kiev anymore.
Yep.
Which is just like insane. It has no bearing. But
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's like all that's really gonna do is it's gonna really fuel that kind of nationalist stance of we need to separate from the rest of Ukraine. Like whether it be to join Russia, like that whole region of the ethnically Russian peoples are going to be like, well, we either need to join Ukraine or become our own country, or sorry, join Russia or become our own country, because it's not going to work here anymore.
Yeah, and to be fair, like if they were annexed into Russia in a similar way as Crimea, they would have like, it wouldn't be perfect, right? Like by any means, but like Crimea, like Russia is an asymmetrical federation, meaning like some parts of Russia are basically countries within themselves. Like if any country recognized that Crimea was a part of Russia, they could do trade deals directly with Crimea and not go through Moscow.
Yep.
But they're like not able to do that because nobody recognizes it. So also like, and that was originally the status that Crimea had with the rest of Ukraine until Ukraine dissolved their constitution and like absorbed them fully in the like early 2000s, I think.
I think 2005. I could be wrong on that year, but
right. But like you know, even if like I think like going back to Ukraine is a last ditch option for a lot of those people because even though they don't necessarily like want to join Russia, at least they'll have more political independence and power if that was the arrangement, because that was like that's the arrangement they're asking for.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to one of your opening statements, you mentioned Russia being imperialist with their goals, and in my analysis of what happened to Russia directly after the perestroika is basically Putin was on a mission to basically he saw the destruction of the Soviet Union and what it did to the population, and basically he moved in a way where he was hoping that the Russian Federation could then join NATO and the imperialist West in pillaging the rest of the world. But as is the case with capitalism and all its contradictions, it basically couldn't help but decide, no, we're going to keep messing with them, for another 20 years so we can keep making money. And now you have this massive contradiction of two capitalist powers fighting against each other. Russia, I think, in my opinion, would like to be how the United States is in terms of the exploitation it's able to do, but it is incapable of doing so. They don't have the manpower, they don't have the equipment, they don't have the logistics, the naval, the air power. But because of that, they now find themselves siding with people who are going to side with anybody who's fighting against the United States. We see this in when Wagner says they're going to send troops to Gaza, or when Niger says that they're going to ally with Russia. It's not so much that Russia is the savior of the world, not at all. But so much of the world, rightfully so, sees the United States as the equivalent of the Nazis. So anybody who's going to fight against the empire is a temporary ally.
Yeah, and I think I guess another thing that is important to keep in mind is that the specter of the Soviet Union forever haunts these countries. There is never going to be a point where there's not a left contingent that is pretty significant, that is well versed in class politics. So I think that those kinds of the kind of way in which we oppress people around the globe and use our military to do so is just not something that they would ever really be supportive of. I think what Russia wanted more so was to become kind of like a lot of the other European countries, where maybe they don't have that many troops, but they still reap the benefits.
Mm-hmm. Right.
A secondary member, a secondary member.
Yeah, and I think that as when it was clear that Russia would not be accepted into that fold, that had a lot to do with the fact that Russia is the most naturally resource rich country, meaning that this is a prime country to join that its interests are more aligned with the global South's interest, in the sense that what the United States and Western powers fundamentally want is to come in and control these natural resources.
Exactly.
And so it's not necessarily Putin's government is they're not ideologically friendly to leftists, but they have to have some kind of they have to be at least willing to work with them to some extent because of how large the political contingent will be. Because people just remember that life was better under the Soviet Union and don't forget about that.
Yeah.
And they have been trying to steer into that with, I don't know if you've seen the erection of Lenin statues, having Lenin, starting to get plastered everywhere and trying to capture that Soviet nostalgia and keep it from budding into. So they're trying to appease the leftists that are in the country.
And also, I was reading that most of the books that were the most purchased books of last year were all leftist theory texts.
Yeah.
And so I think also there's a heightened interest from the population in these ideas to begin with.
For sure. And in particularly in Russia, I'm sure. But I would also say all over the world, the contradictions are becoming so tightly wound just within the last 10 years that people all over know that something is intrinsically wrong with society. Yesterday, I was at Sephora. I was trying to remember which makeup store. I was at Sephora with my wife, and we were talking to the cashier, and she was like, "You guys are so nice. Some people are really, mean nowadays." And she's like, "People are changing," and I'm like, "People are changing because people are bitter." And we just started a conversation, and I told her people are really, are aware that something's not correct in society. Nobody's getting what they need, and she's like, "Yeah, it makes a lot of sense." And I gave her some riz. I told her you should look up something called class conscious. She's like, "What's that?" I'm like, it's just when groups of people basically come to the same sort of conclusion. I really softballed it to her because I don't know what she's gonna do if I'm like, I'm Marxist. She might be like, "Yeah, wait," but that the idea is anywhere you go at this point, people know that shit's fucked up. I don't know how else to put it. Like, not in a very eloquent way, but shit is fucked up.
No, it's very eloquent. It's exactly right.
That's how they would say it. That's how a lot of the working class would say it. So that is probably the most eloquent thing that you could say.
Shit's fucked.
Shit is fucked.
Shit's fucked.
Put it on a sticker.
This is a good clip.
Good slogan. Good slogan.
Yeah.
Also, I think, you know, like the idea, like obviously, the like ideas of like class consciousness and like socialism have always just been able to permeate themselves more when like economic conditions are the most dire, and that just happens to be the case in, you know, like third world country, global South countries. And so like those ideas have always been more accepted there than they have been here, for example, or like in Western Europe. And I think, you know, like a huge component of the propaganda is like a consequence of Red Scare policies, like political whatever in the 19th century or 20th century. And I think for me, it's really important to like correct those things and to like go back and analyze and talk about them more, because it's like, I think it's hard to imagine for a lot of people what socialism or communism could look like when the only examples they have these immediate, really strong negative connotations around, and they have no idea what it looked like in practice. Like we're conditioned to believe it's not possible. So like without a framework for what it would actually look like, and not just like, oh, here's hypothetically what we would do, but like these are examples of how it worked. That is the most helpful for people.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Going a little bit back to the Ukraine NATO war or NATO Russian war. I feel as if we're at the point where Ukraine will not exist as a nation state. In the more likely scenario, I believe, is essentially it will become a rump state with Russia essentially using much of the East as a forward operating base. In the inverse, that NATO were to win the war, and they're not going to, that it would basically become a military outpost for the United States. It's a very sad, story of what's going to happen to all these innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do think that like NATO ambitions are like is probably like the largest driver. I think something that people like in the West don't really understand is like every time NATO says something aggressive about Russia, like Putin's numbers skyrocket, because like they are genuine. Like they saw what happened in Libya, they saw what happened to Yugoslavia, they saw what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq. Like, they have a genuine reason to be afraid.
They saw what happened at home. I mean, it wasn't a ground invasion or bombing, but they saw what happened at home when the West. When neoliberal shock therapy happened, we've gone over it in this podcast before, but the absolute decimation of the people's lives in the former Soviet republics was terrible.
I always say this every time we bring it up on a podcast. 40 million people homeless immediately.
Yeah,
overnight,
and that's an astronomical number. Like, how do you like how do you deal with that? And I mean, we've seen the consequences. Real quick, a comrade Cutie Pie couldn't join us, so he's just saying that he loves us and that he wishes he could be here. Work on your homework, Cutie, and get some rest.
Yeah, get your schoolwork done.
Yeah.
Instead of watching us. What was I going to say? Okay, so pretty broad question, I guess, but what do you think? You said earlier you don't think this conflict will last much longer in Europe. So what do you think, in your analysis, is going to happen? And then how do you think things are going to play out, between Israel and Palestine?
So what I think will happen moving forward is that I think that the Eastern territories will most likely become a part of Russia. I think Western Ukraine will exist, but will be significantly crippled because, like, the United States is already saying, like, I think you need to start thinking about peace negotiations because, like, this isn't going well. Yeah. Because, like, the only way this could have gone well was, like, a quick, decisive victory, and that's not what happened. And, like, but I don't think it will ever really be able to recover. You have the shock therapy, which made like a huge depopulation crisis. A lot of people who left as refugees are not going to come back because of the fact that like the material conditions and the places they've gone to are better. And I think all of those things will make it so that it will just like continue to like weaken as a state unless something really significant happens. In terms of like the Eastern territories, I don't necessarily think they'll become just like a military base, because it is part of like where they have really fertile like soil and like where a lot of the like
exaggerating a little, but yeah.
But I think what it will do is like I don't necessarily think it needs to become this like like military base to be for the rest of Europe, because to walk away from this with the things that you wanted is enough of a victory over American empire, especially because it's like they're already trying to put their foot down on other issues. So like I think like the way that Russia is interacting with the rest of the world is still like imperialist, but it's not as bad as America is. And to be fair, I think there is a desire now to like kind of following China's lead in the sense of trying to build this like unity amongst global South countries. And
I
think
there's
Putin
been a real shift, yes.
I think Putin at the end of the day is just an opportunist.
Yeah.
So he's going to go with what he thinks is the best option. And it's becoming clear that like putting his stake into trying to have like good mutual, like beneficial business dealings with global South countries is going to be way more beneficial to him than trying to do what America does.
Yeah. I want to give the floor to Larry real quick, because I can see he's bobbing his head, and I'm going to forget real fast if I don't say this. I feel like what's basically happening is, Putin's an opportunist, and he's going to sort of follow China's lead, and all these other, BRICS countries that are not socialist countries, with the exception of China, are going to basically, what, in my opinion, it's sort of like a reformatting of capitalism as the global hegemony is flipping over. And I think for a time in the East, especially, life will, on a surface, be better. But we all know how capitalism always cycles into decay. So I think once the BRICS nations have their glory days, and it could be 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, once the contradictions mount up again, people are going to say, okay, it didn't work with the United States. It's not working with BRICS. Globally, it has to be revolution at this point.
I kind of disagree in the sense that like I think that might come sooner, in the sense that like I don't think America is going to give up their like hold on global hegemony very easily. I think that they're going to continue to start wars to try to maintain this. And in World War I, we see the emergence of the Soviet Union. World War II, we see the emergence of China. During the Cold War, we see the emergence of a lot of socialist states. Socialist states seem to come about in these times of great global conflict. And I think that, especially with the like climate crisis the way that it is, I think that like these states won't necessarily get very far, because I think that like the conditions for revolution will come much faster, especially as things deteriorate. And like generally, like even though these like states are still like capitalist states for the most part, there is like such a strong left contingent in all of them, and not really like a desire to totally squash them. There's a desire like Russia to like squash like the queer rights movements, but like that's about it. Like they don't go after leftists in the same way, really, from what I'm aware of, at least. Like
not yet. If
class
give it time.
Yeah. I know if anybody understands Russian, if you check out Konstantin Sioman's beautiful podcast, I think his estimation of the matter in the Russian Federation is a little bit more negative on where the left is facing repression right now. So I would disagree on that, but that's only having listened to him and his appraisal of the situation.
Yeah. And I think it's like the thing of like it could go either way, right? Like I think it's at a make or break point, and I'm just probably a person who likes to be a little bit hopeful. in the sense
Yeah.
of the, like
Revolutionary optimism.
yeah. Also,
Yeah, I think I was just gonna say I think for me, like I haven't 100% reconciled with, ironically, what we were saying in the beginning with like how fast things actually move. I mean, just within the last month alone of the sharp increase in global class consciousness with the genocide that is occurring. I'm going to say you're probably right. I feel like I'm the kind of person where I'm like, I really don't know. So for me, it's just like, yeah, maybe it will happen at some point in the future. But who knows? It could happen next week.
Yeah.
I would say,
I hate to make I'm sorry.
I was going to say, like, I think the big thing that'll happen because a lot of these countries are, even if they do go capitalist as U.S. hegemony fails, they're never going to, most of them are never going to get to the same level that the U.S. was. And the people there, having lived under those conditions, are not going to let that happen, or they're going to try not to let that happen, I should say. And I think before we see anything, we're just going to see a lot of border changes, and we're going to see another major war. Like, we're not quite there yet, but we will see another major war. And to your point, like you said, like we saw the Soviet Union after the First World War, China after the Second World War. I don't know if we're going to see like a socialist great power come out of a Third World War, but we will see the destruction of the United States as a result of a Third World War. And then all these other nations can start forming their own paths of self-determination.
I think it's also like important to like keep in mind too that like, you know, that America's like that like capitalism doesn't exist without the exploitation of the global south.
Yeah.
And because like, and that like historically, you know, oppressed people don't have a desire to do what their oppressors did back. Not like obviously like the violence defending themselves, but like not build the same systems of oppression in return.
Yeah.
And with that being like, so I think the reason too of like me being more hopeful in that the global south might not, you know, do capitalism is the part that like a huge component of what has kept these like class consciousness down has been the presence of the United States and the U.S. military, and also that like, you know, if they follow the general trend, they're not going to have a desire to like subjugate former capitalist countries that were big and successful in the way they were subjugated. And you know, you can't have like capitalism does not work without that cheap exploitative. Like you couldn't have capitalism like how we have it, or like Europe has it, because it doesn't exist without that cheap exploitable labor.
No, you're 100% right. I don't know, I was tripping earlier.
I think what I was going to say was that I hate to project anything and any outcomes that's, you know, you're just going down a rabbit hole. But I was going to add earlier about the state of what's going to happen with Ukraine after the war. I mean, it's already being bought up by Western finance capital. There's literally an auction site hosted by the U.S. government.
Let's go on it.
Where you can, like I was looking to buy a grain refinery there for like, I think it was like $250,000. So this is being bought cheap. And as far as the BRICS coalition, again, I think, you know, I'm not optimistic regarding BRICS. I think it's just another set of contradictions that this system is just inherently going to go through. I'm not anti or pro BRICS. I mean, BRICS is a development. It's a development. It was an inevitable development as capitalism runs, you know, afoul of this imperialist stage it's been in for a century, and really the post, you know, if you want to call it neo-colonialism, the post-imperialist stage where you've had one hegemon, the United States, at the top of it, and that's starting to crumble. The next contradiction will be a set of competing imperialist powers, whether they like it or not, whether they like doing exploitation or not, they're still utilizing the same system. But there is great hope in that, yes, in all of these countries, Russia, China already is socialist, India, Brazil, yes, there are very strong class conscious movements there that can run counter to what their states are going to do in the future in a way that was crushed for us here in the imperial core a century ago. So that was my statement on all of that.
So
Yeah,
for
I
some
think
reason,
it's fair.
I was just going to say real quick, I couldn't find the website. I was looking for it. But go on, guys.
Also, you know, like and like Zelensky's like banned labor unions and stuff like that too, which is just like priming the population for that kind of exploitation. But I read The Russian Revolution by Walter Rodney, which was really, really interesting. I don't know if any of you guys have ever read it. But one of the things he talks about is kind of like the way in which like pre-revolutionary Russia was already kind of like, I think that like, he doesn't use this terminology, but the way that I would describe it, like a proto-neo-colonial setup. Like almost all of the capital was owned by foreigners, particularly like the United States, France, and the UK. And like the dissolution of the USSR was a desire to like divide and conquer, and the like using this war was attempts to like destabilize Russia so that you could divide Russia even further. That's why we saw those like decolonized Russia maps in order to like better take advantage of those populations. Like one group that I have family members in is the Yakuts, who live in like Siberia, and they live in a place with the most diamonds in the world. And they have a population of about 500,000 people, and their country, like the size is their land, is larger than every country besides like Russia, the US, Canada, Brazil, I think. So like
probably China too.
Yeah, it's the biggest like country subdivision in the world. But, like 500,000 people and the biggest like and the most diamonds in the world and all like the biggest land. You don't have the means to protect that from like Western American imperialist desires. But you do like, but within the like larger context of Russia, you're safer.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think also like America will do their best to keep it like Ukraine as independent from Russia as possible, to keep as much of that land as possible, because like if they can't get the exploitation of like breaking up Russia, making it smaller states and exploiting those, they'll take what they can get in Ukraine.
Yeah.
That's why I think there will still be a Ukrainian state, but it won't be like, it'll just be like a neo colony of the United States.
It'll just be BlackRock, sponsored, or Ukraine sponsored by BlackRock and Vanguard.
Yeah, and I think I should have been a little bit more clear when I said that. Like, yes, Ukraine will still exist on the map as a state, but it would, sponsored by BlackRock. Like,
yeah,
when it really blew my mind away when Zelensky, I think he was in Miami and he was given some expo thing with Elon Musk, and he was like, "You too can be in big business with Ukraine." And then like BlackRock is like in the audience, and I'm like, "Bro, like, what are you doing? You're selling your people into slavery." It's crazy.
Gorbachev sold us out for a Louis bag and some Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut be banging though, so I've considered.
It's like
you considered stuff crust.
Yeah, they literally sold Soviet submarines for scrap metal so they can get fucking Pepsi rights. That's an actual fucking story of
I
Pepsi at one point had the 6th largest navy in the world.
That's crazy.
Because of that.
But kind of bringing it, because we're trying to keep it within the hour. So kind of going to like Palestine. Like, did you see the White House staffers? It was 400 of them wrote an open letter to Biden, and it was pretty much like, "Bro, what are you doing? Like, you gotta chill out." Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I think that that's really interesting because I think that like this has been a really radicalizing moment for a lot of people. I think it's really easy to like turn a blind eye to things that are hard, like to anything generally, but like especially if it's like kind of cumbersome to get that information. And the United States has done a very good job in the past of like making evidence of the crimes we do cumbersome to acquire, right? And this is the first time where people can just see it and they don't have to go look for it. And also that like they're seeing it from this very human perspective and lens. And I think that is naturally radicalizing because we have like an innate human spirit and a way that we feel like innately connected to our fellow humans.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really promising sign because I think once you question one American war, it makes it a lot easier to start questioning all of them. The problem with a lot of those people who are like who don't support, like who think Iraq was a mistake, is they only think that in retrospect. They didn't think it at the time.
Yeah, right. I think it is a very hopeful thing, honestly, because it goes to show you that while, and the reality is in a situation in the revolution, socialist revolution, it is our objective to get as many people to be as principled Marxists as possible, but the reality is that's not how it goes. But the fact that there are people in the machine who, some of them will move on to become true Marxists, others will not, some will still be liberals. The fact that people are in the machine saying, like, hey, what the fuck is going on, I think is a very significant thing. What's up?
Can I be a doomer again? I'm sorry.
Always.
I'll balance you out. We're good.
I am.
I love that.
I love that you do too, because I'm not always so doomerous, but just the topics.
You won the position.
I have to make the analysis I have to make, and I suspect that this is completely political driven move on the part of the staffers. They see polling. They see, listen, the more this goes on, first off, I've seen polls in Michigan where we have a gigantic, relatively Muslim population. And if they don't win Michigan, we know they don't win. And right now, the Muslim community in Michigan, Biden is polling terribly. He's lost like 47% of his base that he had from 2020. Mm-hmm. With those numbers, he doesn't win. So I think it's more the staffers saying, listen, we're going to fucking lose if you keep this up. And the thing is, his staffers do care. I believe there's genuine some humanitarian feeling on that. I think it's overwhelmingly put to the side for political reasons. Mm-hmm. And that those people genuinely care about the DNC. They work for the DNC. Biden, while being the head of the Democratic Party, doesn't particularly care if he loses. I don't think he does.
I don't think he does either, but I think also this like vote blue no matter who crowd has given the Democrats a lot of runway. Because you fully just announced your plans to vote for them regardless of what they do, which is stupid.
Exactly.
But also, I do agree with you. I don't think like these people are doing it out of like purely altruistic reasons. I do think a lot of them probably are seeing the writing on the wall. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, they're the people I'm like kind of the least concerned about, because it's like to be a White House staffer is already such a like intense level of like privilege and like all of the. You weren't going to be a Marxist most of the time.
No. They're not going to get there.
The way that public perception has just shifted so radically is what's more important, because also like, those people are now disseminating resources about other kinds of conflicts. Like I've seen way more posts being critical of the like war in Ukraine and not getting like nearly as much negative comments as posts that were critical of the war even like 3 months ago.
100% agreed. Yes.
People are at the point where they're willing to accept that the United States may not be doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, not in our interest as the working people for them to be doing these things.
And also it's, like I think like the contradiction of the fact that like we don't have anything. We have no social security nets, no safety, no benefits, whatever. But my money goes to this. It's not just like, oh, it's this thing, but it's like my money.
So no, we were in DC and interviewing people. A lot of people said exactly that. A lot of, especially like moms, were saying like, like we have to. This one babushka I was talking to was telling us how like, you have to spend all this money for school supplies, and but the roads are not paved and there's potholes everywhere. But we're spending all of our money to go to these. To fund these wars. Like it doesn't make any sense,
Yep.
And I think when you start to look back, you'll realize that like most of American history is America choosing to fund wars over like making lives better for Americans at every turn. And I think like to start to really understand the horrors of the things that we have done is the most radicalizing experience that you can have generally. Like, I think that was a huge part of my radicalization from like social, I wasn't as bad as most of the social democrats on Twitter, to be fair, but like social democrat who is like sympathetic to like full tilt, like we're communist territory, was also just like understanding like it's not just like it's cruelty by design. Like we are purposefully very cruel when we do these things. We are purposefully like there are like yeah, war is always fucking bad, but like there's a lot of ways in which like most wars are not nearly as bad as the wars that the United States leads. And when you start to understand like, oh, we are just always going to be the bad guys, truly, then it's like it becomes more difficult to turn a blind eye to it.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Beba, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with us?
I guess my final thought would be, I think what America historically has always done best is to hide the crimes of empire by doing it mainly to populations that they could control narratives about within the United States and populations abroad that we had no information about. And with the information age, the benefit it has given us leftists is that people can fully see these things for the first time in a way that they never could before. And when you see it for 95% of the population, you can't ignore it. And you can't just like say, oh, it's okay. Oh, but this, but that. And anyone who is doing that, even just being as simple as like, we have to vote for Biden, seems so out of touch and insane that it really shows to like how much these two parties are similar and how much like this whole political apparatus that we have is just not actually democratic or like not in any way what is going to serve us as people.
For sure. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, no worries.
Fun.
If you want to stay in the chat real quick as we end this, but thanks everybody for watching. This is episode 20. Feels like episode 100. By the time we do episode 100, I'm gonna be old and gray, but it's very exciting. But
already there. I don't know what I'll be.
You'll be on the mantle. We'll have a bust for you, Comrade Larry.
Don't do me that way. I don't want a mummified Larry sitting in the.
That's not what I meant. No, not a mummified Larry.
You sit in the chair. I have the mummified Larry in my chair right here.
Weekends at Larry's. Oh my God. Goodbye, everyone.
Good night.